Today we are going to do the next part of our pincushion, which is going to be sewing around the outside edges. For today's part, you are going to need scissors, the fabric that you cut out during our last video, a hand sewing needle, some pins, and some thread. So what you are going to do first is you're going to want to put a couple of pins in your fabric so that it'll hold it in place so it's not going to move around. And they're going to stay together. So you want to make sure that you match up all of your edges of your fabric. You also want to make sure that the good side of the fabric, or the right side, is on the inside. And the wrong side of the fabric is on the outside. So you want to match your edges up, and you just want to take your pins and just put them in your fabric. You don't need too many, just enough to keep the fabric together. And then we are ready to get our needle and thread ready. So similar to when we did our buttons, you're going to want a pretty long piece of thread, okay? A little more than your arm's length. You're just going to cut that thread, and you're going to thread your needle. And just like what we did with our buttons, you're going to match your ends together so that you have what I like to call double thickness thread. So basically your thread is going to be folded in half. Your needle is going to be at the fold, and then your two ends are going to be matched together. And we're going to tie a knot. So you're going to hold the end between your pointer and your thumb. You're going to wrap the thread around so that you have an X, and then you're going to hold the X with your thumb and then slide the thread off your finger so that you have lots of twists. Okay, and then you're just going to grab the thread above where your loop or your twists are, and you're just going to slide those twists down so that you end up with a knot. Right. And then I'm going to trim my end just a little bit, and I'm ready to stitch. Now we're going to stitch pretty much 3½ sides. But what you want to do is you want to start kind of in the middle of one of the sides, and then you're going to be stitching around all the corners and the sides, and then you're going to stop so that you have a space. So I'm pretty much going to use these pins as my guide. I'm going to be starting at this pin, and I'm going to end on this pin. So I'm just going to take my needle and thread and put it through both layers of fabric and pull it all the way through so that my knot is pulled up against the fabric. And I'm going to be doing what's called a blanket stitch. I like doing a blanket stitch when I'm doing hand stitching for seams because I feel like it doesn't gather up. If I were to just be going in and out and kind of doing back and forth, if I were to pull it too hard, it would all bunch up the fabric. And the blanket stitch does not do that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle and I'm just going to put it through the fabric right where my knot is again. Just keep that thread out from where the pins are, and I'll just pull it through. I'm getting all tangled up. pull it through, but I'm not going to pull it all the way through. Before I pull it all the way through, and I have a loop here, I'm just going to take my needle and I'm going to put it through that loop. And then I'll pull it so that that loop comes all the way up to the edge of the fabric. All right, so I do have a little bit of a loop here. What I can do is separate the two threads and pull both of them separate until I find the one that's looping up. Then what I'm going to do, my next stitch is going to be relatively close to where that knot is. And once again, I'm going to pull it through. But before I pull it all the way through, I'm going to put my needle right through my loop and pull it through. And what ends up happening is you get a little stitch connected right at the edge of the fabric. So we'll do that again. So I'll go pretty close, and I want to keep it in the same area. Okay, I want to keep a line going all the way around, and I'll pull it through. But before I pull it all the way through, I take my needle and I put it through my loop, and then I pull it through tight. Once more. And what you can do is kind of straighten up those stitches a little bit. So once more, like that. All right, if you end up with a little knot, just gently pull it back so that it'll smooth out. And before I pull it all the way through, I put my needle through my loop and pull it through. And you can see there's a line of stitching going along that edge of the fabric. Okay? Now I've come to a point where I don't have a whole lot of thread, so I want to tie it off so that I can get another piece of thread and continue with my stitching. You can see I've gone around this first corner and come across the one side and then started to come around the second corner. So what I want to do in order to tie it off, it's going to be very similar to when we were tying off our buttons, but what you're going to do is wherever the thread is coming from, okay, you can see that I have that bar that I put my needle through. So what I want to do is actually go around that. So all I'm going to do is just go back down into the fabric. And then I'm going to have my loop. And I'm going to figure out which side moves less. Okay, so it's this side right here. And I'm just going to wrap around. And then I'm going to pull my needle through, and I'm just going to pull that thread so that I get another knot right in there, or I get a knot in there. Okay, and then I can trim my thread. And then what you can do is just put new thread on your needle and then start again, just like we did at the beginning, right where you left off. All right, so I have finished all of my stitching going all the way around. I have a small opening. It's about 1.5 inches to 2 inches. That's really all that you're going to need. I did have to put a new piece of thread to finish my stitching, okay? I just tied it off just like I did before and put a new piece of thread on. It's really important that you don't try to have a really long piece of thread to try to get the whole thing done at once, because what's going to very likely happen is it's going to get all tangled up and you're going to get really frustrated with it. So it's a lot better if you use smaller pieces of thread and just tie them off when they start getting to get short, and then start with a new piece. At my end, I tied it off the same way that I tied off when I needed to add new thread. So what I would like you to do, once you have it all stitched, I want you to take a nice picture. You can take a couple pictures if you want, but I want to really be able to see your stitching. So I want you to take a picture of your pincushion exactly how it is, like this, so that I can see that stitching, and then you're going to be posting it on the Google Classroom assignment.